Hey everyone, and welcome to Ecopsych EXP, where we take a stroll through the forest of eco-psychological themes in video games. My name is Casey, and I'm a doctoral candidate at Veritas Graduate Institute. Thanks so much for joining me. My core message is that video games can and do foster empathy and combat apathy and doomism. I love video games, and I see them as a force for so much good, and I hope that always comes through in my videos. Today I'm going to be sharing an interview with the dev team Vortex Indie Games as we talk about their upcoming game, Turi Kaapora. Turi Kaapora is a top-down hack-and-slash action and adventure game inspired by the Tupi Guarani Indigenous culture. Play as Caipora and fight with the fury of enchanted animals that will transform your blows and improve yourself with the help of ancestral indigenous entities and instruments. Defend the Atlantic forest from invaders and become the guardian of Nhe'ery. As Caipora, you are tasked with expelling the men and machines that devastate the forest. You will have enchanted weapons and a customizable headdress, so you can fight with blows in your own style. Help beings affected by human greed. With the help of elemental powers and spiritual entities, restore the forest, rescue the animals, and do not let an invader remain on this land. Corrupted machines and elements have become enemies, wielders of maximum destruction. In the middle of the Atlantic forest, there are secrets to be revealed and forces that can help in the fight. I started by asking, for folks meeting you for the first time, what's the essence of Vortex Indie Games? What lights you up as a team and keeps you building together? They answered, starting from a group of students to an indie game studio, Vortex has been together since we graduated in game design in 2023. While creating a handful of academic prototypes, we realized a common thread among our best work, addressing Brazilian socio-cultural aspects and elements of political awareness, which increasingly began to be accompanied by serious research. This insight began to clarify our positions and our way of operating. We pursued a path of producing serious games, games for change, with the aim of not leaving learning merely in lines of text, but rather making it part of the interaction. How can a game about social invisibility be a puzzle about how NPCs perceive you? Or how can a game about indigenous resistance transform into a dynamic fight scene? These are some of the questions that have permeated our projects. We want to be a change in the world, and we translate that into our games. I asked, what's the seed of Turi Kaapora? Was there a certain moment or conversation that made you all say, yes, this is the game we have to make? Turi Kaapora began as a semester-long academic project with a pre-selected theme. We would specifically address environmental issues in a game that would also encompass indigenous religious worldviews. As we resumed development on the game, we shifted our focus to indigenous stories and mythology themselves, using our research, contacts with consultants, and interviews to conduct responsible and ethical work. When we realized the vastness of indigenous worldviews and the current state of superficiality in their coverage within the Brazilian gaming market, we decided to move forward with the project. We saw potential not only as an entertainment product, but also for raising awareness and promoting this aspect of Brazilian culture. So, on the game's Steam page, you state that it is a 100% Brazilian hack and slash. What does that mean, and why a hack and slash? The title 100% Brazilian hack and slash refers to the fact that our game is made by an entirely Brazilian team and portrays themes that are also deeply connected to our nation and history. It's not a new mechanic, but rather a new universe, directly linked to our ancestry and culture. The choice of the hack and slash genre was to connect with the emotion of the ongoing resistance of indigenous people for their land and the protection of nature. It was one way to convey our message of strength and struggle. Appreciation of and respect for indigenous peoples definitely seems to drive Turi Kaapora. The game is inspired by the Tupi Guarani Indigenous culture. How do you go about respectful representation, and why is this so important to you? Within the field of indigenous worldview, there are stories and entities that are unfamiliar to most of our audience or are interpreted superficially. This is reflected when we analyze Brazilian games about indigenous culture, where we see perpetuation of stereotypes, vilification of entities, and misguided approaches. The entities are considered part of folklore, without cultural boundaries and treated as mere myths. In pre-production, we sought to understand the theme and how we could tell these stories more respectfully. To this end, we established contact with indigenous researchers or people who represent the indigenous cause. We also defined Tupi Guarani as our primary focus, since when we talk about these worldviews, there are differences between indigenous nations that are also unknown. Currently, the team is composed of indigenous members and has contact with consultants. We want to be aligned with the communities, channeling their voices. This culture belongs to the indigenous peoples. We are merely emissaries. You've described Caipora's fight as resistance for the forest's dignity. How do you balance the adrenaline of hack and slash while still enabling players to connect to and feel the forest as a living relative, not just a backdrop. The game designs deliberate moments of action where the hack and slash is the focus, and moments of adventure where exploration is the focus. In the adventure, the forest appears more alive, as this is where we allow the player to delve into the nuances of the biome. Mechanically, they encounter fauna and flora that are part of their personal collection in a menu interface. Narratively, animals and entities from the indigenous worldview participate in quests, and because they are characters of the forest, they call it their home and are affected by its devastation. The action within the game is also connected to the forest. After all, confronting human depredation directly rewards environmental balance. This is repaired when the forest landscape recovers from human machinery and rebuilds itself as the player progresses. Considering how the player and the forest grow stronger over time, we designed visual and mechanical feedback that validates this strength. Could you speak about the Atlantic forest, your relationship with it, and the most pressing problems it faces today? When we talk about Brazilian forests, everyone's attention tends to be drawn to the Amazon rainforest. It's often forgotten that the Atlantic forest, which once covered a large portion of Brazil, now only contains 7% of its original vegetation. Our entire team lives in coastal states that connect, or were once connected, to the Atlantic forest. So we decided to shine a light on this forest that, due to deforestation, has only remnants of its former existence, but still holds many riches within, such as 8,000 endemic tree species and over 100 endemic mammals. Sound and music can express the spirit of a place so vividly. What instruments, field recordings, or other choices root your audio in the Atlantic forest and its indigenous cosmologies? Since each people has a musical identity, we found it interesting to combine a general perspective of what indigenous sounds are and how they are relevant. We created an aesthetic based on percussion and wind instruments, which are very common among indigenous Brazilian ethnic groups. When the game was still a prototype, we acquired some physical instruments from indigenous artisans for our collection, and the search also took place digitally. We used nature to compose the soundscapes. After all, many indigenous instruments attempt to simulate sounds from the environment. The weather, animals, and the human body are also part of this. This reflects the game's atmosphere. We intend to record ambient sounds within the Atlantic forest. However, until now, we've used animal sounds from university sound banks or volunteers, such as Zeno Canto. We always try to understand the animals' habitats before incorporating them into the ambiance. Finally, it's very important to highlight the participation of Arandu Arankua, an indigenous metal band, who, in addition to licensing layers of their music and textures to us, will also be contributing original compositions to the game. Their metal aesthetic is perfect for a hack and slash, especially since it incorporates aspects of ritualistic indigenous music. They play with traditional styles and other styles, and like them, we're bringing this playfulness to the game. Animals and ancestral entities actively empower Caipora. When those other beings help transform her blows, what do you hope players feel or take away about relationships and living in relation to others? It's not just about power, but about understanding that connecting with nature strengthens our energy. When it's out of balance, we also weaken ourselves. Therefore, preserving the environment is essential. It ensures our survival and the balance of life. Animals, from the small pollinating bees to the big and majestic maned wolves and many other species, all play a fundamental role in this process. We hope this connection will awaken empathy for all forms of life, recognizing that every being has a right to exist and that destroying their habitats harms everyone, not just indigenous communities directly affected by it. We want to inspire players' respect for the ecosystem and the individuals who depend on these regions, making them feel part of it all. We have a mini rhythm game for the adventure stages that reflects some of this cooperation. It's based on singing with birds, and in exchange they lend their feathers so you can customize your character. The composition is based on real bird song, which actually exists in the Atlantic forest. Animals, enchanted creatures, and elements of nature become allied forces in combat, making connection with the ecosystem increasingly engaging. So, let's talk about corrupted machines, human greed, and invaders. Why is this the story you want to tell? There are many issues we want to address. Violations of indigenous land rights, constant threats of cultural erasure, environmental degradation, and how indigenous peoples are connected to its protection, and finally, how the exploitation of the forest can affect all of society, not just indigenous people. Greed and machines of destruction are a cinematic representation of predation, punctuating a dichotomy between preservation and extraction. It's not a struggle between good and evil, but a struggle between those who live with the elements and those who usurp them. Fire itself is a powerful natural force, but it can be distorted in machinery to devastate the forest. With the steampunk look, we are able to create very original enemies directly related to symbols of resource exploitation, such as mining, deforestation, agriculture, and unfortunately many more. For players who might feel beaten down by eco-doom and constant negative news, how does Turi Kaapora offer a path out of paralysis? How do you approach player empowerment and a sense of hope? Through knowledge, eco-doom reminds us of the negative side of human behavior, but it doesn't truly connect us with nature. Providing this knowledge about animals, the forest, and the indigenous people who fight daily for their space can show that the world is always striving for betterment and a hopeful future. It addresses the fact that if human interference can destroy, it can also build. Tun Cranach, a famous indigenous writer, asks, how can we make the forest exist within us, in our homes, in our backyards? For us, interaction is a seed, and thus the player takes the place of resistance alongside the protagonist, Caipora, and thus understands a more humanized relationship with nature. If Caipora could speak directly to players who've never even heard of the Atlantic forest, what would she say? In Caipora's irritable young mind, it would be impossible for anyone not to know the forest. She would clearly say something like, how can you not know the forest? It's what feeds you. It's what gives you a home. And it's because of it that we all exist and evolve. It's our entire life. And in this line of thought, Turi Kaapora grows, becoming opposed to invasion and prone to maturity. She would add, disrespecting the forest is disrespecting ourselves. I saw a statement you made. In the future, there is also the intention to introduce the game in schools, so that students can learn about environmental consciousness in a fun and engaging way, while understanding that the subject is serious and deserves all of our attention. What role do you feel video game developers can or should play in promoting environmental awareness and ecological empathy? This topic is often approached in an extremely didactic, institutionalized manner, or through the terrorization of the consequences. Video games impart knowledge implicitly, and by having fun, the player develops greater environmental awareness and empathy. It's crucial to utilize an interactive platform to make difficult topics more digestible and dynamic. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your process, intentions, or hopes for this game in the future? The floor is yours. We hope Turi Kaapora is always full of new things and conveys a more assertive vision of the world, of indigenous culture, and of nature. We strive daily to create an original universe that still respects the Tupi and Guarani worldview. And of course, we also work to develop satisfying combat, charismatic characters, and intriguing obstacles within the forest. Ultimately, we just want to craft a fun and deep experience for players. Vortex Indie Games aims to change the world step by step. In the future, we aim to have more tangible game-related actions. And Turi Kaapora is just the beginning. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Vortex Indie Games for their time and all the effort they put into their responses. I greatly admire what they are doing and can't wait to try the game out. Wishlist Turi Kaapora on Steam today and keep up with the development journey on the Vortex Indie Games Instagram. Until we meet again, please feel so very free to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, thank you so much for being a part of this little ecosystem.